All right, the background video will just be me clicking around on current games that are happening. It has nothing to do with what this video is about. This video is about introducing Triple Triad Masters. So it's going to be pretty similar to some previous stuff, but framed a little differently. In chess, you can, of course, win the Chess Master title. And there are a few different versions of this. Usually, nations have their own rating systems, and you can attain a national master title, which is the one I have. I do not have any international titles um, in chess, and then, or in anything else. And then in FIDE, the international organization, if you attain a rating of 2200 FIDE, you are titled a candidate master, not yet a full master. 2300 FIDE master, 2400 and some other requirements, international master, 2500 grandmaster. And there are no titles above that, which some people think should eventually be added, because when the grandmaster title was originally created, this was actually before they had the rating system. They kind of said, these are the 8 best players in the world, you are now the 8 grandmasters, something like that. And so it was this incredibly elite club, and over time it grew, and there are maybe 1,000 grandmasters in the world today. So it is obviously a far, that's still a very, very elite group, but it is a far less elite group than it used to be. And so some people want new specifications. Specifically, there are usually these days around 50 players over 2,700, saying 2,700 is a super grandmaster, that kind of thing. Anyway, I've applied the chess elo rating system to Triple Triad tournament play, and I wanted to set the bar somewhere that would have, I think, a nice cutoff. There have been 900 players who have played in tournaments. There have, of course, been many, many more players who have played Triple Triad at all. If we took the 900 player and took the top 1%, and about 1% of players are the level of active chess tournament players are the level of national masters. So if we took that same thing, we'd get 8 or 9 masters, and that felt a little low to me. Lower than I wanted the number to be. I also wanted it to be something that, not an arbitrary cutoff, not like if you have a rating above 2253, some weird number. So I decided we're going to go with what USCF sets for National Master. It's going to be a 2200 rating cutoff. Anyone whose tournament performance rating has ever passed 2200, I'm going to assign the very important title of Triple Triad Master. This is, of course, going to be a small portion of the population, but it is to say these are players, and of course, you can have fallen below the rating after. You keep titles once you've earned them. So this is to say at some point they attained that level of mastery, and I am crediting them with the title. Many of the players on this list are no longer rated over that amount. Some were rated substantially over, but are now under. Others barely got over, are now under. Others barely got over, but have stayed barely over. Some have stayed, comfortably over. But anyone who has ever been over, I'm assigning this title. I believe there are 25 such players, so I'm just going to go through them and the order in which they became Triple Triad Masters by this definition. There are also many greats who just won't be here. Of course, 25 players, there are a lot more great players than that. Some lack of consistency, right? I think an example of this, in fact, he might be an example of a few of these things. Someone like Kazakh has those 2 finals runs, but between them had a lot of early exits and is a bunch of icons, but the icons never come together. So there's never this continued massive success. It's always here's a huge success, here's a couple little failings, here's a success, here's some little failings, right? And it never adds up to getting the rating over to 2200 at any given point in time. So they're going to be players that just, weren't quite consistent enough. There are other going to be players. There are also going to be players who didn't play long enough, right? It's going to take some time to amass a record. Now, if you perform well enough in the few tournaments you play, there are going to be 2 people on the list. You can probably guess who they are who played very few tournaments, and a third who also played, 5 or so, who did make this list because their achievements in that limited time were so tremendous, right? So dominant. They beat enough strong players that their rating went up enough. But that's going to be another reason some people you might think deserve to be here won't be on this list. Of course, people who didn't play tournaments, aren't going to be on the list. As always, my lists are quite tournament focused, though I've tried to do some things to get away from that. There are others who were just a win away. Meta was also just one win away at one point from entering this group, but was not able to win that next game. A couple others, Kaus, Bren, Kazik. No, Kazik was the one I brought up earlier. Kazik was, depending on who the opponent was, he was the farthest from making it on that group of 4 players. But if he adds one win against the right opponent there, he easily passes it. But most people are missing this list because this is, a really high requirement. But those are some reasons why some greats you might think should be there, usually missed via one of those categories. So, okay, here's our 25 masters in chronological order. In 2004, we got our first master, and it is I think a very fitting first master. It is the person you're likely thinking of. It's Doc Evil, and he is our only master from 2004. In 2000, and he did it just playing 3 tournaments. Tremendous achievement. And also, because it was the start of Triple Triad, all the ratings start off close together. At the same number. I set it at 2000. So all the ratings start at 2000, which means there's no one rated 21 or 2200 for him to beat. So he has to win a higher win rate than you might have to later on, because everyone he's playing can't have that higher rating, right? And later on, if there are a bunch of 2200s running around and you get wins against them, you're going to get more rewarded for those wins. He didn't have those players available. At the same time, something that might have made it a little easier is because players' ratings haven't had time to move to how well they're performing. It's possible a bunch of the players he rated at that starting rating, that was actually overrating them, and he ended up getting more points for some of those wins than he deserved. I think the strength of competition that he faced was better than you'd think, but weaker than it was in later years. But anyways, tremendous achievement from Doc, and it is fitting to have him as the first master. If we're continuing to make chess analogies, Paul Morphy feels a very good one. In 2005, we get 2 more. We get Kamikaze, who would continue dominating through 2010, and Karmazin, who, like Doc, played very few tournaments, but was so good in them. This was also the era of 7-rounders, so picking up an extra win when he wins his title in Cypher was enough to break 2200. 2006 is the first year we ever get more than 2, and is the year we get the second most entries to the group of all time. In 2006, we get Sujiro, who wins Eris. Then we get Seto, who had a just really fantastic run in the early years and makes a finals in Triad Wars that year, and that was enough to break 2200. He ends up reaching much higher heights, but this was when he broke 2200. Virgil, a short timer who is probably not mentioned enough, and that's probably on me, but who beat Seto in those finals and then soon after left the site, but hit exactly 2200 with that win. And finally, a name you might have expected to have heard by now, he had a fantastic 2004 that didn't quite get him there, then a terrible 2005, and then a fantastic 2006. And the 2005 dropped his rating enough that it took until the end of 2006 for him to break this bar. And he's one of those players where if you weird player, does really well in tournaments in even years. Very strange, but very poorly in odd years. So this is, of course, Cookie, who was great in 04, bad in 05, great in 06, bad in 07. And because that broke up his strings of tournament results, right, the ratings don't go as high, right? And that's just how rating systems are going to work. But it's sort of weird pattern. Anyways, Cookie is the 7th entry to the club. I would have guessed him to have come sooner. I would have sort of thought, okay, Doc, maybe just Cookie second, then Kamikaze and Sujiro. And I'd probably have thought Karmazin and Virgil didn't play enough to make it. And Seto, of course, somewhere in there. 2007, we only have one addition to the club. It is Dalial, who, of course, had a just brilliant 2007, also a brilliant 2008. 2008, in my video on Players of the Year, I mentioned as maybe the greatest year ever. For instance, my 6th place in the Player of the Year race, when I went back and looked at who I think deserved Player of the Year awards, my 6th place was, I think it was Turds who ended up tying for the actual Player of the Year. He was like 5th or 6th. The other like 5th or 6th was Kaus Debonair, who had just, for the first time anyone ever had, just earned 4 icons in the same year. This is to say, players who had insane achievements that year were, arguably not top 4 performers that year. And both Dalial and Seto put up 2 top 10 all-time years, maybe higher than that. And so just 2008 is a crazy year. We get 5 new additions. We get Turds, who wins Vincent really at the end of 07. I think I have that listed as an 08 event, or he gets really close to the rating number and gets over in 08. Either way, credit it to 08. We get Serenity, who has this fantastic run from late 08 into early 09, but I guess breaks in 08. We have Kana, who I think of as kind of being around a long time, but joins the site, I think, in 06, or starts playing tournaments in 06. Ooh, we have a Clan League game. Oh, I'm invested. All right, really hoping Tezuka does well here, because if Tezuka can hold a tie or win this, Avalanche gets a win over Brotherhood of Seed, while if Akiyama, who is on a crazy hot streak right now, just won a chat tournament defeating Nidus, myself, Vialva, and Delial. Great run. Looking very scary at the moment. I think Akiyama is using a hand very similar to the one Nidus used. Obviously, Brotherhood of Seed do a bunch of hand sharing and similar hand builds, but I think this is similar to the one Nidus used against Sir Smokes, and Sir Smokes was able to win that. And that is what put us up in the matchup. So if Akiyama wins this, this will be a tied match. But if Tezuka can tie or win, then Avalanche get the win in the match. And this is, I think, just a huge swing for the entire Clan League. Right now, as I record this, Twin Moons is destroying everyone, is in clear first. But whoever wins this matchup has a good shot to be the team that has a real chance to catch up to Twin Moons in the second half of the tournament. So really hoping that that can be my clan, Avalanche. All right, back to the list. So we had Kona, 2008. In 2008, this is also when Great Sephiroth breaks through and joins the Greats. And maybe a slightly more surprising name here, Jaws, who I always mention as one of the best players to never win, probably someone who's better than you think he was. The most remarkable thing about him, and I know I repeat myself in these videos, but I think it's just a cool feat, is if you look at players he lost to, he didn't lose it to anyone that wasn't really good. And most players you look through, including super all-timers, just drop random weird tournament games sometimes that they maybe make a bad hand, the game happens, the cards don't click, the opponent finds good moves, and big upsets happen. They just, happen quite regularly. And a big skill is minimizing how often you get upset. Making sure that you come into each match and you're not going to get screwed on hands, and that you're going to be able to defend those difficult positions. But, I think as an example, I think many people would agree Yojimbo is the most kind of consistent player of all time. But as he's starting to go on his just incredible tournament winning spree, he loses a match to Cliff. And, Cliff was good. I like Cliff, but it was a very weird match for him to lose, and that kind of thing happens all the time. When I did prior lists of biggest upsets, Delial and Seto, two of the best ever, faced a lot of huge upsets. And it's easy for a game to go wrong or not to click right. And Jaws seemed to be someone, he wasn't here that long, so maybe not, but in the time we saw, who just, that didn't really happen. You didn't beat him if you weren't very good. And I think that is worth a lot of credit. And it makes him one of the players I would be interested, if we had another couple years of data on them, would that hold up? And it makes me think he'd probably have broken through and won a tournament eventually. 2009, we have my year breaking through, but Slash of Time breaks 2200 first, beating me in the SID semifinals. Then I get through second, and Nightwish gets through third. 2010, only one player, the other Polish brother, MC, gets through. 2011, Yojimbo gets there. Daikon N-Type gets there. He'd been really close. He got close in like 2006, then he got close again in 2008, but both times he followed up with some bad results. But he wins Triad Wars 9, I want to say, in 2011, and D breaks through. And then later that year, with just a bunch of semifinals runs in a row, Piggyman gets there. So if we're looking at kind of a best players to never win list, how many non-winners have made the list? Piggy is our second non-winner to make this list after Jaws. And it's obviously a lot easier to make this kind of list if you've won a tournament, but those two really compiled lots of good results. And as we've seen with players like Virgil, sometimes you can get there if you have one really fantastic win, but if you're not including any tournament wins, you really have to have good result after good result with hardly any bad results in there to be able to aggregate this higher rating. And Jaws and Piggyman both achieved that. In 2012, a player who had had good ratings for a while but really rocketed up with winning Nanaki, we have Vid. And later that year, we have Chickeny, who is our third player who's not won a tournament to make this list, and my pick for best player to never win. When I stopped playing, I thought it was probably Piggyman, Jaws, or Kefka. But now we have a lot more Chickeny data, and I think it has to be Chickeny. I'd probably have Piggy second, but I think you could argue it some different ways. Obviously, there are a bunch of other people in there, you know, your Grats, your Tezukas, your Jadats. A lot of players in that convo. In 2013, we have Sir Smoke, the Rather Great, who, of course, is rather great. I also think Sir Smoke had the best year of anyone in 2013, which really surprised me going back through, because I thought he'd be kind of a very steady second or third best performer, but he rolled that year. Just deep icon runs in every tournament. 2014 to 16, I combined into 1 year, as I've done in the past. Only one player, we have Akiyama. And that leaves us with 24 Masters. And I think it's a good list. I think it's a lot of winners, but not every winner, right? And it's not that I wanted to cut the other winners, but it's the winners who either really peaked high or were steady enough. I think Kaus is the biggest omission, and I do wish he was there, but he fell like 3 points short, like 3 different times. So he was someone who was very steadily maintaining ratings just below that and never breaking through. But we do have a new addition. In 2021, a 25th player entered the club with a finals run in Nephilim, beating some really strong opponents, and despite losing twice in the finals, and, you know, usually in a tournament you can only lose once, so you can only lose so many rating points. But in a 3-way finals, you have the potential to lose twice. He did, but the rest of the run was good enough that joining the list, we have Midas, who is our 4th player to not win to break the 2200 club. And then the one other question I wanted to ask was, are there threats to join the club, right? We do have a new entry in 2021, which I think is really cool. But is anyone else going to join this club? And the answer is probably not this year. If someone gets really good and starts performing well, I think there's a decent chance that next year, you know, assuming TTA is still going, which I certainly hope it is, I think there's a decent chance something breaks next year. But this year, I feel people are a little far away. Aesala is kind of in range on a good run, but probably needs a couple good runs to get there. Meta, if he's playing events, he came really close a while ago. He fell off a bit. His rating is currently a comfortable bit away, but if he had some really good runs, he might be able to get there. There are a lot of players that are kind of 2 or 3 really good runs away, which just makes it, you know, if there are, say, 2 more majors this year or 3 more majors this year, really unlikely anyone breaks it. So this is probably for the kind of foreseeable future, the 25 we have. Maybe I will do a more elite version of this group and call it like Grandmasters or whatever. But these are my 25 Triple Triad Masters. One of them is playing right now. I do want to emphasize, players can have fallen off from where they were, right? a player could have been really dominant in an easier time, or it could be that times are easier now, and players have achieved now what they wouldn't have been able to achieve before. You can argue either way on the travel of time. I tend to think the site has gotten clearly significantly stronger, but views can vary there. And it also could be the case that someone was really invested in the game and fantastic at it and isn't now, and isn't the same as they used to be, and that's no slight on them. That's fine. But anyone who has ever broken 2200, I will credit as this, and if anyone joins this list, I will be excited to add them to the list. And I thought these as the 25 Triple Triad Masters made for a fun list. It's not quite the same as my top 25 of all time, though it certainly has some similarities, but Virgil was not in my top 25 all time. Jaws was not in my top 25 all time. Piggyman just missed my top 25 all time. So, and Metis isn't in my top 25 all time. So it has 4 different players than that list has. So slightly different, not that different, but a little bit of a different way to look at it. I was also thinking, I might have mentioned this in another video, of starting to introduce matchups as like, well, let's do this one right. I bring up the leaderboard. So here we have Tezuka versus Akiyama, right? And Tezuka, if this was a like Olympics or sporting event, it would be, Tezuka, Finland #1. And Tezuka, I believe, is the #1 rated player from Finland, but let's check it, because he might be the #2. Who is rated higher, Jadat or Tezuka? This is the question. It's not a very important question, but I thought it would be fun. Yeah, Tezuka is the #1 player from Finland, while Akiyama is both the #1 player from Italy and the #3 player from Europe. So certainly Akiyama significantly higher rated right now. But I thought it might be fun to introduce, like, on one side we have the Finnish #1 playing for Avalanche. On the other side we have the European #3, the world #5 playing for Brotherhood of Seed. Obviously, I don't keep my rankings easily enough accessible for me to know players below certain rankings. Like, if someone's not in the top 50, I'll have trouble finding them because I made it easy to find the top 50. But I thought that could be a fun way to introduce people. I was going to call this a quick video, but now I want to stick on the game, so feel free to stop watching if you're only interested in the master nonsense. But I'm quite curious what's going on, so maybe I'll open the Discord and take a peek at this game. For power, they both went with a kind of 9898 or 898 type card. They both also went with an A9 corner. You'll notice Tezuka went for the 9-9 on the level 10 and the A9 on the level 9, while Akiyama did it the reverse. Then at level 8, Akiyama went with a 7-9-6-4 that can play off some of the 7s facing down and one of the 8s facing up. And Tezuka picked a third powerful corner to pair with their previous two with a 9-8 corner. I believe all cards have to be women, so that limits card selection quite a bit. And that basically covers the same 3 corners for each of them. At level 7, they both picked the 2-7-7-8, and they both use their level 5s first. You'll notice there's a gap in level, so some incentive to use the low level early, and they both got it out of their hands. Akiyama makes an interesting move. He grabs safety, and he also says, if you don't lock in 8, I am now threatening to take it, and you don't have a recapture. So the kind of obvious move to do is A2, 5, 9, and 8, and the question is this safe after, say, 2, 7, 7, 8, and 5, or after 8, 9, 8, 2 in 7? There is also some worry that Akiyama will leave both squares open, and it will be very difficult for Tezuka to play next to it without getting comboed. But here, I would not be super worried on a kind of fundamental level about that. Because neither of 8, 9, 8, 2 or 2, 7, 7, 8 can be set up to have the other square, right? One of them is 5, one of them is 7, but neither of them is ever going to have both those squares. So if if Akiyama played in like 4 or something and left those both open, I suspect Tezuka would have a good move in probably 3, maybe 2, and shouldn't be too worried because Akiyama doesn't actually want those as the last 2 squares of the game, because one of his cards will be dead on each, and whichever card he keeps, Tezuka can force him to go in the other square. So my instinct is after 8, the threat is if Akiyama can go in 7 or 5 immediately. I'm not really calculating, so I'm not too confident. This is just kind of guesswork from general principles. The other square I would seriously look if I was Tezuka would be 3. Now, there isn't safety in 3, and there's not like something you can force action in a positive way. Like if you put A259 in 3, maybe you force 8982 in 2, but you don't want to see 8982 in 2. That doesn't give you anything. So I think 8 is the kind of key square here, and probably A259 is the move to be spending your time on. So if A259 in 8 and Akiyama goes 2778 in 5, Akiyama will be up 6-4, but he will have no left power. So I think it is almost impossible to imagine Tezuka losing that game, because 2778 and 2 will be such a strong double capture for him at some point. Now maybe it's scarier than I think, because let's say Tezuka started with 3998 and 7 there, capturing 8. Now if Akiyama went in 4, Tezuka goes in 2, Tezuka's doing great. But if Akiyama goes in 1, he could go in 1 with 8982, and 7964 has the plus in 2, as well as the triple capture in 4. But does that matter? No, because Tezuka can just block 4. So whatever, that's fine. Yeah, because 7 will make it 5-5. So I think Tezuka's fine against 2778 and 5. Is he fine against 8982 in 7? That's going to make it 6-4. It feels like he should be, though. Say he plays... So it's a little tricky, because if he plays 2778 in 5, he will go up 6-4. But Akiyama can play... I think that's still a tie, but Akiyama can play in 4, and his 2778 will have the plus wall against both Tezuka's remaining cards going right, because both will have 9s left to the right. Now I think, if I'm not counting wrong, Tezuka could block 3 there, because Tezuka still has the cards in 6, 8, and 9, and if 3 is safe, then that's going to be a tie against 2778. So I think that's still a tie. So I'm believing right now that 8 is a tie. Against 8982 and 7, there's also 3998 in 5. Just going there immediately. But it's hard for 7 to be too scary, because Tezuka will have 9 locked, and he has 6, and he's going to have 8 locked. So it's hard for 7 to be scary. I don't think 5 is scary, because it just gives up so much left power. And if you're not going either of those squares, I mean, maybe there's something kind of scary in 3, but Tezuka threatens to go in 5. And so I suspect A259 is a tie. Should I find out? Probably not till the game is done. I think I will put in the cards for when the game is done. But I'm curious, right? It's so hard to like bring yourself to do a full calculation when it's not you who's gonna, die if things go wrong. So it's so much easier for me to click over to like, please just tell me the answer. is very lazy. It's the problem with having like computer available in chess analysis is, you know, he's picked up a259. I think this is very encouraging because I think this is the right move. He does go an 8. I should start putting this in the database too. So this is from the Avalanche Brotherhood of Seed matchup. This was the scary move of the game, by the way, because after the 5th move, Tezuka should be able to calculate out the rest of the game in a 7-minute time control. So, like, I'm pretty comfortable Tezuka will complete most move 6 decisions perfectly. So if he survives this move, this is the kind of critical, pivotal point of the game for play of this level, then I think he's in good shape. All right. I guess we will check. I want to know. But that probably ruins the excitement for you. All right, so I guess we won't know. We'll keep the tension. Tezuka, a player with a few good runs who could hit that master rating. He's been closer at times, though, so he's a bit of a distance away. And not taking Triple Triad necessarily as seriously as he has sometimes in the past, which is fine. I mean, people should find life balance. So the reasons I thought 7 and 9 were the critical squares, or sorry, 5 and 7, was if you can't kind of pair 5 and 7, I think you usually get the most pressure by occupying them quickly, right? If there's some kind of key squares where all the damage happens. And also note, Tezuka has 1 card for both those squares, right? Tezuka can keep up 3998, and Tezuka has something useful, has a useful recapture in either 7 or 5. I didn't actually realize that if Akiyama goes 2, 7, 7, 8, and 5, and Tezuka goes in 7, it combos back the card in 5, but I don't think that matters in any variation at all. That card is so easily flipped by both players in 5, and is never really going to combo anything, that it just doesn't matter who currently possesses it. Anyway, what I was saying was, you see kind of, those key squares to attack what Tezuka just played are 5 and 7. And the question is sort of, can Akiyama play in such a way that he has a card for both squares? And I believe the answer is just no. There's no way to do so. Therefore, because you're the first turn player and you will be left with 1 card for your last move and your opponent can determine which square you play in, you don't want those to be the last 2 squares of the game. As the second turn player, you get to choose which the opponent plays in, and you have 2 cards left for your last move of the game. So even if you don't have a card that covers both squares, you can often have 1 card that's good for one card that's okay for the other, and you play to take advantage of your opponent, right? So if there's these paired squares and each of you have 2 cards covering each of the squares, 1 card for one square, 1 card for the other, usually that works well for the second turn player, because the first turn player uses up one of those cards and suddenly they're forced to play in the wrong square with their other card. Second turn, that doesn't really happen, right? You have 2 cards left at the end, you can hold up both. Now maybe that overly committed you to holding on to those 2 cards, but hopefully, that makes some sense. So as the first turn player, you really don't want 5 and 7 to be the last moves of the game. So usually you try to find a way, I'm going to block one of those squares now, and I'm going to do it in a way that hopefully creates other advantages. So that's why I was focused on, if Tezuka can survive against moves in both 5 and 7, it is hard for me to imagine that this position is bad. Now, there could be tricky stuff. It could be that 2, 7, 7, 8, and 3 is really tricky. I doubt it, but it could be the case. Like, you could easily imagine, 2, 7, 7, 8, and 3. Tezuka goes 2, 7, 7, 8, and 5. Why not lock in 6? That flips 3. But then Akiyama goes in 2 with 7, 9, 6, 4. And that's going to flip 3 back. But also, Akiyama still has a threat of a combo in 7. However, Tezuka has 8, 9, 1, 5, can block 7 with an 8 up. 8, 9, 8, 2 will not capture that. And Tezuka will end the game with the cards in 6, 7, 8, and 9 as his for a tie. So there's definitely ways it could get scary if Akiyama can leave those squares open. But usually in this kind of situation, if he doesn't want to, then if you make sure you hold against those moves, it is likely you will also have holds against the other moves. It is unlikely that that other move will screw you over. Possible, but unlikely. So my guess was that other moves would not be that big a concern. Also, if Akiyama plays in 3, maybe Tezuka can just go something like 8, 9, 1, 5, and 2. That's probably fine as well. Probably. Not necessarily, but let's say probably. So yeah. But I do find that a useful way of calculating positions. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point, of kind of, you're playing second turn, there's a paired set of squares. After you're thinking about a move that creates kind of 2 key threat squares for the opponent. They don't have one card for both. They can't set up to have one card for both. What do you need to calculate to make sure your move is probably good? And I think the answer here is it's unlikely for them to have a serious threat that doesn't occupy the threat squares for because of the logic I've laid out. Therefore, the moves to really check, and Akiyama makes weird moves, like he will find creative ideas in 2 or 3 here, and they'll often be ties, but he'll have found kind of the most creative way to tie. I think this is something he has that maybe is in common with something Nimloth talked about, where he said when he and Doc Evil played, they'd find the weirdest moves that tied. So this is a weirder occupation of 5, for instance. And unlike the 2, 7, 7, 8, and 5, this kept up, both left and right power. 2, 7, 7, 8 is that top row sweeper. So the obvious move for Tezuka is to take the safety. So 8, 9, 1, 5 in 7 seems a natural move to make. If Tezuka goes in 4, note that he is, with 8, 9, 8, 2, note that he has a combo in 3, 9, 9, 8. So Tezuka would have to play 2, 7, 7, 8, and 2, which plus walls 1, but that doesn't combo anything, and that's going to be a 5, 5. If Akiyama goes in 2, that's just kind of strange, just loses. And if he goes in 3, he cannot keep up a card that is good in both squares. But that probably may not matter because Tezuka doesn't have a capture of 1 from 4. So that probably ties anyway. But yeah, I think without serious combo potential in 2 or 4, there's not much point spending time looking for a win for Tezuka. So I will pop open the solver, see what it thinks. I suspect it'll say, well played game. For which I'm very proud of Tezuka, given that Akiyama has been playing great, and given that there is a lot of pressure on when you're playing, a critical matchup for, your team's life in the tournament, and you're on second turn and need to manage at least a tie against an excellent player. All right, so it thinks Tezuka's first move, it's going to take a while to calculate out to Akiyama's. It thinks Tezuka's first move was non-losing but non-threatening, that Akiyama gets to choose how to pressure against it. Akiyama then goes in 6. It also thinks Akiyama's starter was about maybe slightly below average pressure, though that might not be because the starter wasn't good. It might be the rule set is a somewhat below average pressure rule set. I don't know. So a kind of normal starter, a safe but not particularly challenging reply. And then Akiyama found a apparently very nice way to pressure. Tezuka had 2 moves that tied there. 2 moves to tie. One of them, after Akiyama's move in 6, was 3, 9, 9, 8 in 4. I would never consider that. Or it would take me so long to get to that. That is very weird. Okay, I don't have any heuristics in my head that tell me why that would be a good move. That looks very strange to me. Like, it does so many strange things. Like, often 5 gets blocked after, and then it's going to be a side-to-side game, but you just used a big side-to-side. Okay. I would have to take a while to explore that move to understand it. Alright. Instead, Tezuka played a2, 5, 9, and 8, which was the only other tie, and I think very much the human tie. This left Akiyama, actually, with only 2 ties. So it turned out moves like 8, 9, 8, 2, and 7 were losing to the double capture in 5, and Akiyama... Yeah. Yep. Okay. I can switch you over to that screen for a moment. So here, if he had gone 8, 9, 8, 2 here, that loses to this here, not to this here, because importantly, we need to be able to capture here with a 7 to the right, so this doesn't combo. Well, if we switch up the move order, this version doesn't work. So 7 didn't work. He had to block 5. There were only 2 cards to block 5 to tie of the 3. And they were this guy and this guy. This was the one I had looked at. And we headed for a tie. I wonder what the last moves of the game were. I assume, I'm just going to assume here, 8, 9. All right, let's close this because it doesn't matter now. Get you back to the game. It ended. Sorry, I didn't screen move properly. So 8, 9, 1, 5, and 7. It must have been 8, 9, 8, 2, 4, 2, 7, 7, 8. No. I was thinking the tie was 8, 9, 8, 2, 4. Tezuka plays in 2. Akiyama plays in 3. But that wouldn't give us the cards that are left here. So Tezuka must have played in 3, not 2. Is there any other move order where this makes sense? There's no way Akiyama played in 2, so he must have played 8, 9, 8, 2, and 4 first. And then Tezuka must have gone 2, 7, 7, 8, and 3. Akiyama goes 2, 7, 7, 8, and 2. 3, 9, 9, 8 is left over. And let's make sure that this is a tie. Huge ups to Tezuka. Great result. Obviously, this is great for me. And yeah, I guess we'll end the video there. So what we've learned here is Masters ain't shit. It's all about Tezuka. Very nicely played.